Good evening, everybody. Welcome to this Festival of Ideas event at York. And today's event is Sharkpedia, about this wonderful book, which we're going to learn a lot more about soon. So I'm John Pitchford. I'm a mathematical ecologist working at the University of York. Before we start, I've just got to go through a few technical pieces of housekeeping. So subtitles are available. If you need to use these, there's the subtitle. It's called CC Show Captions button at the bottom of your screen to turn that on or off. If you have technical issues such as dropping out of the signal, you can rejoin using the original link that you used to get to this presentation. If you're watching live, you will see a Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. You can post questions there, and there'll be about 20 minutes at the end of the session where I will select as many of the questions as we have time for and ask our speaker, Daniel, to provide his answers. And also, today's event is being recorded, so you can watch it again. It'll be put together and available for you shortly after the event. So today's speaker, I'm very pleased and excited to introduce Daniel C. Abel, who's a professor of marine science at the Coastal Carolina University in the United States. And he's been researching for many years on shark ecology, physiology, and actually many other things. This man has got an awfully broad knowledge of the subject. So he's the co-author of books, The Lives of Sharks and Tooth and Claw, Top Predators of the World, and several other books. Today, we're going to hear about his new book, Sharkpedia. I was given a script to read out to explain what this book is about, but actually, this morning, I went to the dentist and I accidentally was reading it. For the dentist seems like a totally inappropriate place to read a book about sharks. And it sparked up so many conversations. I've already decided who it's going to be passed on next and who gets it after that in the village. So it's a fascinating book. It's beautifully written and full of gems of information. So without any further ado, over to you, Daniel.
Well, thank you, John, for the very generous introduction. Thank you all for attending my talk. Thanks to the festival. What a great idea for a festival, right? A spring festival, a festival of ideas. The title of my talk today is Sharkpedia, and it's based on a book of the same title published just last week by Princeton University Press. And it's a pocket-sized book, which is a celebration of sharks in 99 terms that discusses shark lore, evolution, biology, ecology, behavior, et cetera, using a very accessible, readable approach. I became fascinated by sharks as a kid growing up on the coast of South Carolina in the southeast United States in a magnificent setting, much like you see here on Winyah Bay, near where I am right now. And there, a walk on the beach might reveal something like this, a small black pit shark swimming in cat-deep water along the beach. These are largely harmless beasts, but they occasionally bite people. And they quickly release because they're not on the spectacular animals that we see. I vividly recall scenes like this that fueled my fascination, and I'm sure many of you have similar stories, mysterious outlines of animals that I'd been conditioned to fear my entire life, emerging from our local murky green-tinted waters. If you venture onto one of our numerous fishing piers that jut out into the Atlantic Ocean, you might be greeted by this shark welcoming committee. And if you fall in the water, they'll just scatter. They're not going to bother you. These sharks feed on both the entrails of the fish that the fishers clean on the pier, as well as the smaller fish that are attracted to the pier study. And we know this because we did the first study. One of my graduate students, Kelsey Martin, did the very first study, surprisingly, about 5 years ago on shark associations with piers. But any fisher will tell you that they're very common there. Now, the sharks pictured in the previous two slides are, without doubt, my favorite shark, the sandbar shark, which I consider the most spectacular beast of the ocean. It's a bottom-dwelling, temperate coastal species distributed worldwide, sometimes called a brown shark in other parts of the world. It reaches a maximum of, say, 2.5 meters, about 8 feet. Now, unfortunately, in large part because of this large, beautiful first dorsal fin, it was important to the shark fin soup industry, and sandbar sharks became overfished. Fortunately, recovery is underway, but because of the slow life history characteristics of these animals, which I'll tell you about in a minute, it's expected to take decades before they reach historic population levels. Incidentally, both of these illustrations are by world-renowned wildlife artist Mark Dando, who illustrated Sharkpedia and other books of mine as well. Here's a sandbar shark swimming in what is one of my favorite aquaria, the Lisbon Oceanarium. So now I have an assignment for you all. While you're mesmerized by this gorgeous animal, I'd like for you to take a minute. You might be biased by seeing this, but I want you to picture a shark in your head, perhaps your favorite shark or just one that springs to mind as a typical shark. And you might have envisioned a bronze whaler or a copper shark in the midst of the sardine run off the coast of South Africa. And I should acknowledge that none of these beautiful photos were taken by me. I have friends who are professional photographers, and they took most of them. Or an oceanic white-tip shark. When I certified to dive back in the 1970s, my scuba instructor told us if we encountered one of these during a dive, we should draw our dive knife, and in some rather gruesome instructions, he said, kill our dive buddy to lessen the chance of us being attacked. Such was the species' poor reputation as a killer in less enlightened times. They do have a deserved reputation for actually eating shipwreck and air disaster victims because they're open ocean sharks and there's not much food out there for them. But you have plenty of time if you're just casually swimming with them and you can't get out of the water. Perhaps when you thought of a shark, you thought of this animal, right? And most everybody does, the white shark. Or this one, a great hammerhead. And I chose this photo because you can see that sinuous turn that it's making. That's one of the functions of that strangely shaped head, or cephalofoil, that it's like a forward rudder. It does other things. It pins down stingrays, it gives them some lift, but it's a rudder that enables these really tight turns as well. Maybe you thought about this lemon shark in Bimini, the Bahamas. I was there with 15 students just last week, seeing sites just like this. Or maybe an animal with an outsized reputation also, the tiger shark. Or a bull shark, similar to one we just swam with last week. A few years ago, we had an opportunity to throw some of our students in a cage. Actually, they went voluntarily in the Bahamas, and these bull sharks were attracted, and my students were the ones that were on display. And you might also think of Caribbean reef sharks. This is some drone footage and underwater footage also from the Bahamas, where I take my students annually. This is a controversial activity I'm showing you. This is called provisioning, and we no longer do it because provisioning means feeding the animals to attract them. And that has a deleterious effect on these animals. It draws them away from their natural range. It alters their ecology, their behavior. For example, they become habituated to the presence of people. It provides them maybe with the wrong kinds of nutrition, or not enough, or too much. So that's why we've discontinued this. And we've had no interactions, and nothing dangerous has happened to our students in nearly 30 years of doing this. And finally, you may have considered as your typical shark a short fin mako. This is the other candidate, in my opinion, for the most magnificent fish in the sea. Now, like its cousin, the white shark, this animal defies the rules of being a shark, in part because it's adopted the mammalian characteristic of being warm-bodied, that is, warmer than its environment. And it enables more powerful swimming, more acute sensory abilities, and makes it a better predator. So based on what I predict that you might have thought is a typical shark, you might have thought one that's large, gray, fast swimming, and is found along coastlines in shallow water. And of course, you'd be wrong. In fact, a typical shark is small, brown, and lives in the deep sea, like this gulper shark. A picture I took when I was teaching with Semester at Sea, and we went to the Port de Pêche fish market in Casablanca, Morocco, almost 4,000 miles due east of where I sit now. So the fact is that there are about 550 different kinds of sharks, and 2/3 of them are smaller than a meter, right? Or 3.3 feet. What's more than half of them are in a place you'll never see. They live in the deep sea, waters deeper than, say, 200 meters or 660 feet. So to reiterate, a typical shark is not large, gray, fast swimming, and found along coastlines, but rather is small, brown, and lives in the deep ocean. Like this Cuban dogfish, a hint is the deep sea shark is looking at its eyes. If they're green, they are adapted to harvesting the blue-green light that gets to the depths that they're found in. This is a Cuban dogfish that's been tagged by scientists prior to being released. And this is a gulper shark, another gulper shark. Let's consider another commonly held belief that all sharks are apex predators. You probably associate the word apex predator with being at top of the food chain. And most of what we understand about apex predators comes from terrestrial animals. They don't have any predators themselves. They're typically large-bodied. I mean, think some of the big cats. They're often the least abundant organisms in their ecosystem. They elicit fear among the potential prey. That's a really important function of an apex predator, and they're wide-ranging. Well, again, if you thought all sharks are apex predators, you'd be wrong. Not only are most sharks small and live in deep water, they are not all apex predators. Large species like the white and the tiger and the bull, like I showed you before, along with beasts like orcas, are true apex predators, although we'll see in a minute that this situation has to be qualified. It's a little more complicated than that. But most sharks, like this leopard shark swimming in the kelp forest off of the west coast of the US, are considered mid-level predators. Mesopredators is the scientific term, and they're one level down below the top predators. I should emphasize at this point that even though most sharks are mesopredators and only a minor number are apex predators, they all play important roles, the disproportionate roles that predators play in these marine ecosystems. And what about newborn sharks like the tiger shark on the left or the Atlantic sharp-nosed shark on the right? It's a local species. They're definitely not top predators at birth. And while the tiger shark may grow into one, the Atlantic sharp-nosed never will. It's always going to be small. It'll be a mesopredator, small fish, crabs, shrimp, worms, etc. Oops. And then while indeed, all sharks are indeed still predators, some like the whale shark in the upper left, the basking shark as you go clockwise, and megamouth eat on the lowest rungs of the food ladder, even below the top predators and mesopredators, and they eat plankton. They're called planktivores. So that literally means plankton eaters. Now, ecologically, these have more in common with a herring, a sardine, or anchoveta, other filter feeders, plankton eaters, than they do with other sharks. And this also means if sharks aren't all top predators, it means they have their own predators. The biggest predators of sharks are, as you can see in the upper left, and sorry for the gruesome nature of this photograph, but there are other sharks. This is a bonnethead shark that was depredated or preyed upon on one of our experimental longlines by probably a bigger lemon shark or maybe a sandbar shark or a bull shark, but also crocodilians and marine mammals, avian reptiles, birds we call them, also are predators of sharks. And this artwork, again by Mark Dando from the Sharkpedia book, depicts a behavior not recognized until very recently, and that is orcas killing and eviscerating what many of us considered, the ultimate top predator on the planet, the white shark. Now, these two orcas from False Bay, South Africa, primarily, were nicknamed port and starboard because of the ways the directions their dorsal fins were pointing, one to the left, or leaning rather, one to the left, one to the right. And this had real impacts on the area, both commercially because of ecotourism, but also ecologically because the white sharks left and didn't return to False Bay. And I don't think they're still there in the numbers they used to be as well. Yet another commonly held idea is that sharks are mindless eating machines, likely to attack you, right? I think with this audience, we know ahead that that's not true. In fact, sharks exhibit surprisingly complex behaviors. And again, by now, almost everyone knows that nose sharking regularly includes humans as a component of its diet. Sharks are capable of learning, memory, and recognizing familiar individuals. Some sharks have been taught to recognize jazz, but they were dilettantes because they couldn't tell the difference between jazz and blues. Some even have different personalities within a single species, say lemon sharks or tiger sharks. Some individuals are bold and aggressive, whereas others are shy. This is a video from a graduate student of a well-behaved tiger shark in Bimini, Bahamas. It's patiently awaiting its turn. Although maybe a little bit of a bully compared to most sharks, but it's definitely, this is an animal that's got a more docile than personality. One behavior of note is the aerial acrobatics that I'm sure you all have seen on documentaries of white sharks, which may take the shark 10 feet or more out of the water, maybe 3 meters, in pursuit of a Cape fur seal or maybe a decoy, a Cape fur seal decoy. And this is clearly a move designed to surprise the animal, the prey, and feed upon it. But there's lots of other leaping behaviors as well, and some aren't so easy to explain. This to me is phenomenal. I've seen this maybe 20 times in my life. These are leaping black-tip sharks. Sometimes they call them spinner sharks, but there are two very similar species, the spinner and the black, and they both do this. They corkscrew from the water, and you're left in awe, mesmerized with a what just happened kind of look when you see these things, these big beasts, 6, 7 foot beasts, corkscrewing out of the water. Why they do this? Lots of conjecture, but nobody knows. Are they shedding external parasites or shark suckers? Are they communicating with each other? Are they establishing dominance? Is it a mating behavior? I like to think they're just expressing their exuberance for being a shark. And here's some truly unique footage that you won't see anywhere else from my former graduate student, Alex Oathheit. Watch closely and you'll see the schooling blacktip sharks off the coast of North Carolina do this behavior, corkscrew out of the water. It's just a phenomenal thing to see something like that. I think there's one more. We'll wait about 20 seconds and let you see one more. I don't think this footage has been shown anywhere else. And then there was this. This might be a shark you're familiar with along your coastline. This is the languid, humongous filter feeder shark, the basking shark. If you were to ask me what is the least likely candidate to muster the high energy required to reach escape velocity out of the water, this would have been the animal. And yet this was observed and reported in the scientific report at the bottom of the slide. Well, let's acknowledge, but quickly dispense with the discussion of shark bites and attacks. These are rare events, perhaps 100 or more documented annually. That even may be an underestimate, with fewer than 10 fatalities. Even though shark bites and attacks are low likelihood events, given enough time, low likelihood events happen, and the results may be tragic, but they don't look anything like this screen capture from the 1975 blockbuster movie Jaws. Now, even after you enter the shark's habitat, you're safer than at home when you make toast, when you cross the street, when you take a shower, when you eat a modern diet, when you breathe, and so on. In the United States, air pollution kills maybe 200,000 people prematurely every year. And if you ever wondered where the dust goes when your tires wear down and your running shoes wear down, that you breathe that too, and that can be a bigger threat to your health than sharks are. Now, sharks have an array of senses to locate their prey, and most of the time they work exquisitely. They should. They've been developed over their 450 million year evolution, but their senses sometimes are fooled. And in our local murky waters, the blacktip sharks, which I showed you at the beginning, they're swift, streamlined, swift swimming eaters of small schooling fish. Sometimes they confuse a human hand or a foot that's swimming and they bite. And it's comforting to me because almost immediately they recognize that humans don't taste like they thought their fish would taste. And they have the equivalent of like a blech feeling and they spit it out. And, you know, it could be dangerous, but for the most part, you're left with just a small series of puncture wounds. Working with sharks can be dangerous, but I want to emphasize that most of the danger is almost after we catch sharks to study them. on the left, I was using a recently caught sandbar shark, which do beautifully out of the water. We return them to the water quickly. They swim away. We have evidence that almost 100%, probably 100% survive. But I was pointing something out, and this animal decided to bite my finger, but it left me with only a series of like paper cuts. In the upper right, a student caught me with a little more cavalier approach to a larger shark, and fortunately, it didn't bite me. And on the bottom is a close call from my friend and co-author Dean Grubbs. I'll take the bite of a sandbar shark over a hammerhead any day. And this shows me averting the jaws of a lemon shark, which we caught in a long line immediately prior to releasing it. So a lot of the bites occur because of us being buffoons and not taking the proper precautions with sharks. Now, before we move on to some other fascinating aspects of sharks, I need to at least acknowledge the myriad threats to their existence, beyond the threat that all of us face on the planet and we already know about. So these are a few pictures from books and from online. I'm going to go over these very quickly. There's no way I can spend the appropriate amount of time on them, but the biggest threat to sharks right now is overfishing. And overfishing includes commercial fishing that's directed towards sharks for shark meat and fins. It includes bycatch, which I put down as sort of the equivalent of side effects of pharmaceuticals. These aren't intended to be caught. They're not targeted, but they occur. Sharks are caught because hooks and nets sometimes don't discriminate. Finning is different from the previous category. Finning refers to the illegal removal of fins from sharks. Now, if a shark is caught legally and sustainably for meat, then why not allow the fins to be used as well? It seems to me I don't eat shark, but that would be the best use of it. Finning kills the shark and typically returns it to the water dead or dying. And then there's recreational fishing, which, in the past, no one would have thought that small scale fishing could have cumulative effects that would affect large numbers of sharks, and yet we now know that it does. There's also habitat destruction, dredging for channels, commercial fishing that destroys habitat, development. I keep mentioning Bimini, the Bahamas. There's a development there that wants to fill in dozens of acres of mangrove forest, this important ecosystem, to build a 9-hole golf course for this idea of development. Marine pollution is a broad category, and I'm not going to have time to go into it. I'm going to mention a little bit in a second, but there's chemicals, heat, noise, light, plastics, nutrients. Biodiversity loss is a threat to sharks. And I'm not talking about the sharks themselves now. I'm talking about potentially their prey or their habitats. And finally, global climate chaos, which I won't discuss, which I hope everyone in the audience understands as a scientific fact and not open to debate. Now, about 1/3 of all the sharks and their close relatives, the skates and rays and chimeras or ghost sharks, are listed as threatened by the IUCN, which is the International Union for Conservation of Nature. This is the group that monitors that. And this slide depicts some of these threats. Fisheries with the highest bycatch include bottom trawls, which aren't shown here, gill nets, which are shown in the upper right. And this is an illustration from my book, The Lives of Sharks. Pelagic longlines, which is a panel that goes all the way across at the top, showing some of the bycatch for fish for lines that may target swordfish or mahi, but they can catch indiscriminately sharks, toothed whales, turtles, and even seabirds. Also, if you look in the lower left, there's abandoned fishing gear that catches sharks, and this is known as ghost fishing. And accurate estimates are lacking, but you'd be shocked by the amount of fishing gear that's abandoned in the oceans. I was one time on the ocean in a research vessel pulling a trawl, and we got stopped dead in the water in a big fishing vessel because we encountered one of these large gill nets that had been floating and abandoned. A study in 2022 estimated that from 62 to 220 million pounds, about 100 million kilograms of plastics were lost in 2018 alone from industrial fishing. So that's a huge amount. Now, sharks that are mostly threatened include short fin mako. This is, again, a picture from the Port de Pêche fish market that I took in Casablanca. But there's blue and silky, salmon sharks, bonnetheads, dogfish, cat sharks, a number of sharks, angel sharks, for example. And there's deep sea fisheries that are catching sharks that whose biology we don't understand yet. So we don't even know enough about them yet to understand their impacts. Entanglement in plastics is a relatively recent and increasingly frequent occurrence among marine species. So this is a sandbar shark that we caught an experimental longline back in 2017. And you'll notice this plastic strapping tape just in front of the pectoral fins around the gills. We were able to remove the tape and release the animal, and it was healthy, judging by its girth and its behavior, and the fact that it ate the fish in our long lines. So and this is unfortunately an increasing occurrence. Now, why are sharks more vulnerable than, say, tunas or mahi or other bony fish? Well, that's because their life history characteristics ally more with those of an elephant than a tuna. They're slow growing, they mature late in life. They have relatively small litters. A sand tiger has two babies with a 2 or 3 year reproductive cycle. The reproductive cycle is long. Some animals can be, like a spiny dogfish, are pregnant for 2 years. Some may be as long as 3. And the last two are also important. Many sharks have specific mating areas and nursery areas where they either have their young or where their young spend their early pivotal times in their lives. And they're highly migratory. So even if they're protected in some systems, they have to navigate a veritable minefield of other threats when they migrate. So let me talk about a few solutions, and I'll do this very briefly because I still have some good footage and some more interesting aspects to talk about. Sustainable shark fisheries, that is, those that continually produce sharks without negatively affecting the long-term survival of populations, are possible. Dusky smoothhound in the Northwest Atlantic. In fact, some of that may reach your tables as rock salmon. Gummy sharks in Australia, Atlantic sharpnose and black tip along our coast. And they're sustainable because of science-based management. And one of the aspects that is not always done is not managing for, say, the dusky smoothhound or the Atlantic sharpnose or the black tip, but the fish, but whatever shark is most vulnerable in the catch. So if you're catching black tip sharks, and they can be fish sustainability, but you're also catching sandbar sharks because the gear doesn't discriminate between them, then you can be really have a devastating impact on the sandbar sharks. Moving on down, protecting ecosystems is critical. I'm an educator. I spend a lot of my time doing education. I write books for that reason. I give talks for that reason. I teach for that reason. But I think it's pivotal that we make sure that students and adults are educated, ethical consumers, that we understand the ramifications of our action when we eat. And then, of course, in order to save the sharks, we have to save the entire planet. So we need global, national, regional, and local action on climate change, biodiversity loss, peace, lots of issues beyond just the ones listed here. All right, let's talk about a few more, fascinating aspects of shark biology. And I want to talk about serial tooth replacement, their jaws, sharks in freshwater, and I'll conclude with a quick virtual field trip on one of our boats. So the next 3 topics I'll discuss are adaptations, and that is features that enhance the ability of these marvelous beasts to survive, and they're passed on to their offspring. It's what I think we all find fascinating about sharks, is how they live their lives. Now, adaptations can be anatomical, they can be how an organism behaves, or they can be concern their internal function. One of these adaptations is known as serial tooth replacement, or scientifically polyphyodonty, meaning that they have multiple rows of teeth in various stages of development, and the teeth are not firmly embedded in bone like yours and other vertebrates are, but rather are loosely rooted in collagen, which is a fibrous protein commonly found in living systems. And sharks have from 1 to several rows of teeth. And white sharks, for example, have only 1 row functional with several rows in development, like you see in the upper left, which is in a blunt-nosed six-gill shark, or as a tiger shark next to that. If you go clockwise, in the right, you see a sandbar shark, and then to the left is a blacktip shark. And it's ironic that we don't know a lot about the evolutionary history of sharks because shark cartilage doesn't produce very well, doesn't preserve very well. But the most abundant vertebrate fossil may be shark teeth because they shed so many of them, hundreds to thousands over their lifetime. Now, you may think that it's wasteful to make and continually replace teeth. I mean, it costs energy. They have to remove minerals from the water. But evolution is about trade-offs, and serial tooth replacement in combination with some other shark adaptations works for the group. And let's look at the terrestrial world for a greater understanding of why. If you're a top predator, like one of these big cats, you need a full set of teeth to be an effective predator. And since if you lose one of your teeth, then you're going to have a potentially lethal disadvantage. And starvation is one of the main reasons, one of the main causes of mortality in some of these top predators. So if on the next slide, you'll see a lemon shark that literally almost bit my foot when we caught it. But it lost a couple of teeth when it did so, and they were embedded in the wood of the boat. But that's not a problem. This animal will continue to hunt. It won't put it at any disadvantage at all. So another adaptation in sharks that makes them superlative predators is how the jaws of sharks are supported in the mouth. Obviously, this isn't a shark, but if sharks had jaws like we did, in which the upper jaw is firmly affixed to our skull, so you're not moving your teeth in any way, the rest of your skull doesn't move, except for up and down. Well, then, and your skull then moves there as well. Every bite would be the equivalent of bobbing for apples. And we would be talking about sharks probably in the past tense, since catching and grasping and manipulating prey that are moving in seawater on the bottom would be impossible if sharks had such small gapes. But in modern shark, the upper jaw is not firmly connected to the skull. You can see here it's being thrown out a little bit in this white shark. Plus, they have an underslung jaw that they can open up with strong musculature attached to it. So that enables them to have a larger mouth size, we say a larger gape, and that enables them to handle prey better and eat larger prey as well. And this enhanced jaw mobility reaches its peak in the goblin shark, which is shown here. And if you look on the left in the series of photos, you see that series of drawings that they already have a wide gape, and then to add injury to insult, insult to injury, they will throw their jaw out to get a prey at him because the jaw is loosely connected. It's called slingshot feeding. And another interesting but counterintuitive adaptation is the jaws of one of the most formidable predatory beasts on the planet, the tiger shark. People who collect tiger shark jaws, again, I don't do that, often find them somewhat misshapen after they dry out. And that's because the jaws of tiger sharks are not heavily mineralized as you might think. And this is another adaptation because when a tiger shark bites, say, the shell of a turtle or a big fish, or takes a chunk out of something, the upper jaw is flexible and the jaws bend to allow more teeth to contact the prey. Okay, so let's go on to one last adaptation. Now, sharks flourished during the golden age of sharks. There were more kinds of sharks 360 million years ago than there were bony fish. Now there's 550 kinds of sharks and 35,000 kinds of bony fish. So bony fish clearly are the dominant fishes, but sharks thrived that long ago. And they were the dominant predators, not only in the oceans, but also in rivers and lakes. But now there's only 4 species of sharks: the bull shark, which is shown in the top and bottom of the right panel, and river sharks, which are shown in the left panel. And they tolerate freshwater. And almost an entire family of rays, which are sharks' closest relatives, live their lives in freshwater in the Amazon basin. Now, a lot of sharks can live in estuaries, maybe 50 species, where, and numerous rays as well, where the water is of mixed salinity. So why so? Why is that so? Why are there so few freshwater sharks? Let me just give you a few examples, a few explanations. One is saltwater and freshwater are very different environments. And the interior environment of sharks is largely adapted to a saltwater existence in the exterior. And you move one to the other, and that can mess up their salt and water balance. And if that happens, it messes up the entire internal physiological function of the animal. Also, sharks have a very cool electrosense in organs called ampullae of Lorenzini. They can detect minute potential differences or electrical amps or small electrical signals that are given off by some of their potential prey. Now, if you imagine in freshwater systems, electricity isn't conducted very well, so they may lose that ability. Also, reduced sperm viability. When a male shark fertilizes a female shark, they flush the sperm in with seawater. And you can imagine in a freshwater environment that could possibly kill the sperm. Let's just move down to the last two, less buoyancy. Freshwater isn't as buoyant as saltwater is. And because of that, in order for a shark to be able to maintain its position in the water column, it's got to swim. And to swim, it's got to swim continuously and maybe even more energetically because of a tendency to sink. And so that's a big problem for sharks in fresh water. And finally, there simply may not be room in freshwater anymore. Sharks evolved and have lived the greater part of their lives for the last millions of years in saltwater, and freshwater fish have gained a foothold that sharks probably can't dislodge. All right, what I want to do now is show you a little bit about some of the work I've done with sharks. I've got about 4 minutes left before you can ask some questions. But I did my graduate work at Scripps Institution of Oceanography in La Jolla, California, studying heart function in sharks. And no, sharks are not heartless, but they do have smaller hearts than you might expect. Here I'm shown lecturing on sharks prior to a reading from the book Jaws when I taught with Semester at Sea. The following short videos show a snippet from a research and student training cruise during which we capture, identify, measure, and tag and safely release sharks. And it's followed by a sensationalized sequence from a Nat Geo show that we did a few years ago. So this shows us pulling in a buoy. These are baited hooks. And believe it or not, within about 30 minutes in this large system, we can get these small sharks. These are sandbar sharks that exist in a very important nursery for them. And this study elucidated that this is an important ecosystem for sharks and should be protected. We remove the hook very quickly. We measure them, maybe take a sample, determine whether the male or female, put a tag in them and release them. And the following one is a short sensationalized video from Nat Geo.
And it's just the beginning.
All right, I'm coming. So we got 2. All right, so let's go pick up the line, second line. We've got a big lemon shark.
And their last find of the day is the most remarkable.
All right. This is probably a 7.5 or 8-foot shark. And you see, we put a small shark on the line for bait. Small shark took the bait, and then the bull shark took the small shark that ate the small shark we had on his bait. The shark eats shark eats.
What I'd like to do is finish with just one quick short video that shows sharks in a slightly different light. And this is a sympathetic video to some of our commercial shrimpers locally. Watch this. These are some sharks that are tearing up the net of a few of our last commercial fishes. So these are black-tip sharks, one of the species that's relatively abundant. So with that, what I will do is take some questions from you.
Thank you very much, Daniel. That was superb. Absolutely full of information. I'm not allowed to ask questions until the audience have had a chance to ask their questions, but I've got lots.
Okay.
So looking at the questions that the audience have provided, the first one might be an easy one to answer. Where can you find sandbar sharks?
So they're globally distributed, and it's interesting because in some of the populations, like there's a population in the Mediterranean, there's a population in Hawaii, along the east coast of the U.S., Chesapeake Bay, there's a big sandbar shark nursery. We have them along our coast. They have very different life history characteristics in different places because they've been under different ecological evolutionary pressures in some of these areas. Hawaii, for example, is a very different environment than the coast of South Carolina.
Thank you. So the next question comes from Andrew Timms. I'm going to put Andrew's first two questions together because you've shown us an awful lot of people swimming or interacting in the ocean with sharks, and they all seem to survive. So his first question was, is it safe to swim with sharks? And what is the best course of action to take in the event that a shark approaches you?
Yeah, good. I'm happy to answer that question. Let me tell you, if you are in the ocean, you're swimming with sharks. Except in a very few areas, maybe in the higher latitudes, when you're in the water, a shark probably detects your presence. Now, that might be a little bit of an oversimplification. So it's comforting to me to think of all the people that are the hundreds of millions of hours people spend in the water, maybe billions, and the lack of interactions with sharks that say that sharks are, we're not in danger. We swim with sharks only with species whose behavior we understand, and I do it not for entertainment. We do it for education. I don't disparage people who do it for entertainment because I think it's partially educational for them as well. So that's when you go to an ecotourism operation and you swim with sharks. Some are less ethical than others. And so is it safe? Yeah, for the most part it is, depending upon where you go and what you do. Is it safe for the sharks? That's another question. Let's see if I can recall the second part of that was, what do you do when you see a shark? So what I say is, for my students, our tendency is to swim towards them because that's what we like to do. We study. But the smart thing is to just very, very slowly remove yourself from the water, and, don't make a big deal out of it. Don't splash. I think that's prudent advice. And there's also advice that, you can get in practically any news report about sharks. Don't swim at dawn and dusk. Don't swim near fishing piers. Don't swim near fishing piers. Don't swim where people are baiting sharks in. Don't swim if you know an area has a high likelihood of, having a lot of sharks there. Among the more dangerous sharks are bull sharks and white sharks. But again, these are the low likelihood events to have dangerous interactions with them. But if you do, these are two of the sharks that are gonna be more dangerous.
Thank you. I've got two questions which are hitting exactly the same theme. I'll put them together. So from Kate Harper on behalf of Ori, age 6, and also from Kathleen Walker, how can someone help sharks?
Yeah, thank you,
Excellent
Kate.
question.
Yeah, so at age 6, you're probably on the right track already. Just even asking that question, just having that attitude that sharks are important in ecosystems. You may not get in the water with sharks, but you live on the same planet with them. And so living a sustainable life yourself is one thing you can do. And the other thing is educating yourself about them and learning about them. And when you get to be a little older, you may want to join others in working for their protection, working with some of the, what we call nonprofits, some of the groups that work to save sharks. I think that's an important thing. But go to an aquarium and look at a shark and ask questions about them and spread the information to other people who may not care about them and about all of nature. I think that's important. There's some good groups in the UK that support sharks. There's some in the US as well. If you're a little bit older, you can join either the European Elasmobranch Association. The word elasmobranch is the taxonomic term for sharks and skates and rays. They're close relatives. In the US, you can join the American Elasmobranch Society. They're largely educational, but they also do conservation work as well.
Thank you, Daniel. So a question from Anelka Houston is, it's my understanding that some sharks, like the great white, are adapted to go between saltwater and freshwater. And in what ways are they adapted to do this?
Yeah, so the white really isn't considered one of those sharks that can, they're a high salinity shark. A lot of it has to do with the environment in which these animals evolved. Like think of oceanic sharks, like a blue shark or a mako shark or a silky or oceanic white tip. They never encounter fresh water, and so they're unlikely to be able to go into fresh water. The bull shark is different, and it's somehow found a way. And it does so by making its internal body less salty and learning to live with that, which is kind of interesting. And we've discovered that about juvenile sandbar sharks as well. So a tiger shark, for example, will swim into the bay where we do our research, and some rivers empty into it. And when they detect, maybe in their gills, maybe in the lining of their mouth, that it's fresh water, they turn around and leave. But the other sharks that can live in there, typically don't live their entire life cycle. Although there's some examples of some sharks that have been trapped, but they don't reproduce in the fresh water. But the basic answer to the question is they simply make their bodies less salty, but it still has to cost. It comes with a cost. It's not an easy thing for a shark to do that.
Thank you. I'm going to put two questions together again, because the questions are coming in quite regularly. So from Stephen Edwards, is the fear around sharks historically bound and geographically located? Do all cultures fear sharks, whether that fear is justified or not? Or put better by Swithin McNulty McKernan, have you ever been scared by a shark?
I'd like to just capture all these questions and write a Q&A book. I mean, these are all wonderful questions. Yes and no about sharks. In most cultures, going back thousands of years, sharks are revered. They can serve as omens, especially they were revered as gods in some cultures, Polynesian cultures, Indo-Pacific cultures. If you come back though to maybe the 18th, 19th century, when there was some knowledge of shipwreck victims, they became to be a little bit more feared. But if you want to examine how we segued from respect and awe of sharks to fear, you need to look no further than the media. They enrich themselves by, and it's maybe rightly so. It's human nature. We fear the unknown, don't we? I mean, that's why people gravitate to horror movies or to horror books, because they like to be scared. And maybe that's why the media knows that. But the depictions of sharks in the media, going from Shark Week to even to a few of the other documentaries, to magazines, to online sources, disproportionately depicts shark bites and attacks, often gruesomely. And for some reason, some people gravitate towards them. But no, this has not always been the case. In some cultures, Hawaiian culture, there still is a reverence for sharks, more so than a fear of them.
This isn't a question, but it's from Susan O. She hasn't got a question, but she now loves sharks. So that's a victory.
Great.
You have two related questions from Andrew Timms and Jules McKenna. Jules asks, how did Jaws, the movie, affect the public perception of sharks? and Andrew asks that in a more general way. Is the movie industry, has it done sharks a disservice in terms of the public's perception of them?
Yeah, I think the answer to the second question is yes, but I can tell you a quick anecdote about sharks, about Jaws. It came out when I was in my late teens, and I took my niece and nephew to see it. And I was, wanted to be a marine biologist since I was a kid. So I went to a movie theater, and maybe a spoiler alert, if you haven't seen the movie, you can cover your ears. But at the end, the shark is killed in a rather gruesome way, and the audience spontaneously claps. And my niece and nephew love to tell a story as I look at them and said, "Don't you dare clap." This is a violent way to end fictitious animals' lives. But yeah, the movie Jaws changed everything. It was the first big summer blockbuster hit. And I see impact of it today. People say that there might be an uptick in shark attacks and bites along our shores because there's more people going to the shore. And yet when I go to the beach, I see only a few people in the water. And the more you talk to them, there is this now, especially in our waters, because they're kind of murky along our coast. There's a fear of the unknown, as if when you get in the water that you're going to be bitten immediately. There's this idea, for example, that sharks are attracted to blood. Well, yeah, sharks have a very sensitive system of smell, and they are attracted to blood, but the blood has to reach them. If you go in the water and you have a cut and a drop goes in the water, sharks don't immediately jet to where you are and bite you. And even for the most part, they, by the time they detect it, that may be too dilute for them to detect. But Jaws set up this idea that, of sharks having, that it's sort of anthropomorphized sharks, right? It gave them this idea that they can seek revenge on people, that their only existence is for eating and maybe reproducing. As a marine biologist, I can say there's no way to match Richard Dreyfuss as a real life biologist. I mean, it was a standard that's a bridge too far for people like me. I'm not Richard Dreyfuss. But yeah, all Hollywood, the Sharknado franchise, Franken Shark. I mean, there's tons of movies and they're fun. I mean, my students who love sharks love these movies. But don't they all contribute maybe to this idea of sharks as animals to be feared rather than respected? I think they do.
Okay. Two connected UK-based questions. What sharks can you find in the UK waters, and could I see one in the seas of the north coast of England?
Yeah, you could. I mean, basking sharks. I'd love to see basking sharks. They're found along your waters. There are cat sharks found along your waters. One of the most magnificent beasts in the ocean is the porbeagle. It's not called a porbeagle shark, but it is. It's called the porbeagle, and they're more oceanic, but they are occasionally there as well. I have to, profess some ignorance. I've been to the UK a couple of times, but wasn't lucky enough to get in the water with any of these animals. But that would be your best bet. It's not one of the hot spots for sharks. That would be in the Indo-Pacific and the Coral Triangle along Southeast US. Off of Japan, off of South Africa, Australia. Those are some of the hot spots. But there are definitely sharks along the UK.
If I can put it in, add a little bit, I'm a mathematician. I don't know about sharks, but we're building models of the North Sea and the Celtic Sea ecosystems. When we don't put sharks in, the models don't work. Sharks are doing something, and we can't make our data.
I think that's pathetic. Yeah.
Right. A question from Emma Martha Bristow. I've heard sharks have rough skin. Do the small sharks you've handled have rough skin too?
Yeah, they all do. But it varies. And in fact, when we're working with a shark, let me backtrack a little bit. The scales of sharks are called dermal denticles, and the word denticle sounds like the tooth root. It's because they're built on the same model as a shark tooth is. So they're basically miniature shark teeth, and they protect the shark, and they also let it swim more easily through the water. My students, maybe perversely, all want to have a minor shark bite happen to them because they think it would be like a badge of courage to show that they've been bitten by a shark. And I tell them, no, but what you can do when we catch a shark, if you rub your arm from back to front on the shark, you'll get what's called shark burn. And it's like a rub burn. It doesn't hurt the shark at all. And the shark's skin is relatively thick and tough. That's what the scales are for. But since they are miniature teeth, you can legitimately claim to have been bitten by a shark when you do that. Now, the other thing about shark skin that's interesting, and again, I would be surprised if some of you don't know this already. In some sharks, mating can be quite violent, and the males, to hold on to the females, will bite them, and it can cause some damage. But evolution is so neat. It has allowed females in some of these species to evolve thicker skin. so that the males puncturing them don't hurt them.
Question from Hugo, age 9. What is your favorite shark?
Okay, two of them. The one is the sandbar shark, but the second one is the horn shark, which is found in the Pacific Ocean. It's a shark I used to study for my doctorate, and we kept some in captivity. And they you know, I've been quoted as saying this. It's not scientific, but they're adorable, especially the babies.
Right, we're running out of time. 2 more questions, I think. There's an anonymous question. Do we know how intelligent sharks are?
So, so that's an interesting question. In humans, there's several different kinds of intelligence. You can condition a shark to do certain behaviors. I know back in the 70s, the Navy was conditioning sharks to fetch things and bring them back. One of my former graduate students and now a colleague has sharks that can maneuver through mazes, but of course he does this by putting magnets as the boundaries of the mazes, and they don't like the magnets, so they're able to follow that through. They can learn. I'm not a behaviorist, and I really don't want to overstep my bounds here. Clearly, they're not in the same level as a primate, but they're capable of more learning than you might think. Then shark brains are not small. However, the parts of the brains that are big are those associated with their senses more so than thinking.
Right. So we'll have to make this a final question with apologies to the other questions I haven't had a chance to go to. I've tried to cover the spectrum, but from Maria Neville, you mentioned a shark in the oceanarium at the beginning. How many sharks are kept in oceanariums nowadays? And do you think it's right to keep them there?
Oh boy, you can make that the last question. So let me just say I was influenced at an early age, like many people who are landlocked. I wasn't landlocked, but I was I didn't get a chance to see sharks. So it was pivotal to me to see them in aquaria. I think aquaria that are regulated, that perform conservation practices can be justified. I've seen animals improperly maintained in some, and I don't support those. Not all sharks can be kept in captivity. White sharks and mako sharks can't. Sandbar sharks can. Sand tigers can. Some aquaria are doing captive breeding programs for things like sawfish, which are not doing well in the wild. So it's a complicated answer that I can't answer for you. I think this is a value that you should have thought about yourself and make that own determination.
Thank you, Daniel. On that note, I wish we were in a room so we could give you a warm round of applause, but thank you sincerely for a wonderful presentation. Thank you for sharing your detailed knowledge of this subject. You clearly care so much about it, and you've shared that. Oh, we're getting love and hand claps from everybody.
Well, thank you.
But you got that beauty and that excitement, but also there were serious and practical messages about things like biodiversity, conservation, how the world is put together, and that was just truly exciting. So from all of us who are lucky enough to enjoy this, thank you very much.
Thank you for your time, John, everybody.
Yes. This recording is available, or will be available on the Festival of Ideas YouTube channel. Can be accessed from Watch Again section of the festival. And Daniel's book, Sharkpedia, will be available either being passed around the village where I live for the next several months, or from Fox Lane Books, which again is linked from the festival website. Thank you very much to everybody, and thanks again to Daniel.
Thank you.